Robert noted that I am not wearing my typical pastor's garb, and that is because I'm here to join you in listening to some voices. The voices that we are going to listen to today are voices of climate justice. In the face of enormous challenges, such as the challenge of caring for this injured planet, in the face of these huge challenges, it is easy to become apathetic or resigned or even cynical. But the voices that you're going to be hearing this morning are from people who chose and are choosing not to be apathetic or resigned or cynical, but to do something in the face of these enormous challenges that we face together as a human family. And so I hope that we will give them our ears, and that when we leave this place this morning, we'll be inspired to not just admire what they're doing, but to join what they're doing in the effort to do something. So I'll begin, and I'll invite Wayne to come to the front.
Good morning. Okay, seriously, my first thought when I walked into church this morning was, ooh, Pastor got a new suit. Okay, I'll be honest with you. When we started this climate action project, I almost didn't participate. I was like, well, what's the use? It's little things that I do. What can they matter? What difference can I make? And then I decided to participate anyway, just to make Kathy Necton not mad at me. And so I started off kind of slow, and I started really doubling down on composting. And I started really being more mindful, as I mentioned before, about maybe eating less red meat, eating less meat generally, being more mindful about what I consume. And then I got excited about it. And I thought to myself, oh, I lived in Germany for 4 years, and we didn't have air conditioning. We just kept the windows open the whole time. So I did that, and I've been keeping my windows open. Y'all, pollen was everywhere. It was crazy. That's not a good idea here. Whether it's doubling down on recycling, instead of taking stuff to the landfill, it's amazing what people will just pick up from the street in front of your house when you put it out there. But being part of this effort and thinking about these remarks have really made me think about what it means to be church, as pastors talked about before. And you guys make me not feel small. You guys make it not feel insignificant, because we're all doing this together. And I said that wonderful list that everyone filled out, being sort of part of something bigger than myself, collective action. That makes me feel strong. We can feel strong together. We are not insignificant. What we are doing matters. And whether it's eating a few less steaks or composting a little more, or being more mindful about recycling, or having to dust twice a week because we don't run our air conditioner. If we're doing it together, it matters. And we are all so much bigger together. So thank you for giving me something to sort of believe in, and thank you for helping me to not feel small.
Among the voices of climate justice that we will hear will be included in the voice of our sacred text, as I will be reading from Isaiah chapter number 61. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to grant those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. They shall build up the ancient ruins. They shall raise up the former devastations. They shall repair the ruined cities, the devastations of many generations. May God bless the reading and hearing and our understanding of this word. Casman, where are you? There you are.
When I was trying to gather my thoughts yesterday on this, I actually, before I wrote a single word, I titled it Preaching to the Choir, because I literally felt like probably with this congregation I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. So please forgive me for that. Rather than talk about things that we changed, Neil and I did change a couple of things in our climate justice project. We found, thankfully, that we're doing most of the things that were on the list already, but there were a few things that we could tweak. But I thought I would instead maybe just speak briefly about something that I feel fairly passionate about. I want to just focus on pollinator support in general and the support particularly of nocturnal pollinators through the thoughtful management of evening lighting. Insect populations have decreased by 45% over the last 40 years. I find that statistic pretty shocking, and I know you do too. This affects pollination rates and also affects food availability for dependent species, to include both ourselves and bird life, and then therefore animal life. The three factors that impact insect populations are climate change, insecticide use, and the loss of native plant species and habitat that supports this insect life. Night pollinators account for a much larger percentage of total pollination than we originally appreciated. Night pollinators include bats, moths, and some species of bees and beetles. But moths in particular have been shown to be essential in their contributions to pollination as they travel longer distances to get to their plant sources than bees do. They're attracted to a wider diversity of plants and therefore critical in establishing the genetic diversity of the plants that they pollinate. All of us have seen street lights where the moths are sort of furiously flittering beneath the street lights, and as a child I didn't even give that a second thought. But after I read the book, The Darkness Manifesto by Johann Eckhoff, I began to appreciate that what I was actually seeing was moths in distress caused by those lights. And so the moths are very confused by the rather extreme lighting that's present actually on a lot of street lights. And every moth that's found dead beneath the lights in the morning, and we've all seen that as well, I think, is a moth that will not go on to pollinate a beneficial plant. Studies have demonstrated that nocturnal visits to plants are decreased by 62% in a lighted environment when compared to a dark environment. There is actually a group called Dark Sky International, which some of you may be aware of, but they post 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting. One is to use light only when and where needed. Number 2 is direct light only where needed, and direct the light downward whenever possible. We have a great example of that walking down our walkway leaving pastor's office. We have some downlights that are lighting that walkway. 3 is use the lowest light level possible to achieve your lighting needs, and be mindful of light amplification by highly reflective surfaces. 4 is to use light only when needed, using timers or motion-activated sensors to limit artificial light duration. And then finally, use warm-colored lights rather than the bright white-blue lights, because the brighter lights disrupt the insect populations and animal life much more dramatically. Keep in mind also that bats are also strongly affected by light in many ways. Artificial lighting prolongs their roosting behavior, and in some cases with extreme lighting in a bat roost, the bats actually will not leave the roost and will actually die in place. The presence of artificial light affects their feeding routes and pathways, while also decreasing their own food availability because of the light's effect on the insect population. When possible, try to include native plants in your garden selection. I think maybe Kyle's going to speak a little bit about that. And try to avoid at all costs intentionally planting invasive plant species. I think the poster child of that is the Bradford pear, which during the 80s was planted everywhere, particularly in newly developed neighborhoods, and is now taking over the woods and forests. It's pretty dramatic. If you drive to Fayetteville, there are whole fields that are just covered in Bradford pears that basically establish themselves from the surrounding neighborhoods. Lastly, please do not buy into the myth promoted by mosquito control companies that state incorrectly that their products will not affect your pollinators. We got that spiel. I actually looked it up, and the fact is that all insecticides that kill mosquitoes will also kill your pollinators. And so I just ask that you consider the use of screening for your buildings and repellents when accessing the outdoors rather than using these kind of broadcast mosquito companies. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Great Spirit Prayer. O Great Spirit, whose voice I hear in the wind, whose breath gives life to all the world, hear me. I need your strength and wisdom. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things that you made and my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise so that I may understand the things you have taught my people. Help me to remain calm and strong in the face of all that comes towards me. Let me learn the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and rock. Help me seek your thoughts and act with the intention of helping others. Help me find compassion without empathy overwhelming me. I seek strength not to be greater than my brother, but to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me always ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes, so when life fades as the fading sunset, my spirit may come to you without shame.
When I was asked to speak today, I thought it was so odd to be asked to speak in a sanctuary about gardening. But if you really think about it, gardening is taking our elements of our natural world, plants, the terrain, rocks, soil, and using the aesthetic vision that God has given each of us to create a beautiful environment in which to live. And that's what I tried to do in my garden. That's also why every garden is different, because it reflects the gardener that made it. In terms of making a garden, there are some areas that are very harmful, as we've just heard, but there are also things that we can do in our own space to actually improve the environment. There's techniques. In this area, we can try to restore the natural pine savanna ecosystem that exists here. That's the most water-wise way of gardening in our area. At our home and gardens, we are restoring part of the wiregrass underneath the pines. We're removing the oaks and hopefully planting some other herbaceous plants that are native to the area. However, not everyone's aesthetic vision includes having a yard that looks like the surrounding countryside. So there are things you can do if you prefer more exotic flora around your house. One of those is xeriscaping. It's a low water use planting. We have at our gardens cactus and agaves other plants native to the American Southwest and Western coast that are very low water users. But if you want to plant a more typical floral garden in the English gardening tradition, you do have to water here in the sandhills. The sand doesn't hold the water. One way you can minimize water use is by using drip irrigation. And we've got a number of sections in our garden that deliver the water drop by drop to the plants. It maximizes the health of the plants because you don't spray the water on the foliage. I think many of us gardeners have struggled with growing tomatoes because they get so many diseases in this climate. But keeping water off of the plants themselves promotes the health of those plants. Of course, minimizing water use helps our environment. You've read about the county looking at building a massive new water plant on the Deep River and withdrawing millions of gallons from that river. That river is home to endangered species that will ultimately be affected by any water withdrawal from the river. Believe it or not, you can also sequester carbon in your own gardens. There's a couple methods for this that I've used. One is called hugelkultur. It was created in Austria. It involves placing woody debris, tree trunks, stumps, branches, and that kind of thing, piling them up, covering them with soil, and you can grow plants in them. Ultimately, it minimizes water use because as the woody debris decays underground, it becomes like a sponge. I mean, you've been in forest where you see logs that have laid there, and they're damp. The same thing happens underground. The advantage here is that the carbon is also sequestered underground. And you can do it here and promote the native environment if you have oak trees growing on your property in the sandhills. Mature oak trees are not a normal occurrence here. So on our property, we're removing oaks and I'm burying them underground. Another way you can sequester carbon is using biochar. That's a product created by the combustion of wood in a low oxygen environment. This has been a process that has been used for thousands of years. In fact, they found biochar in the Amazon that's 1,500 years old. It promotes soil fertility, and again, it sequesters carbon. You can do it yourself. I've got a fire pit. I do it in that. Flow Farms here locally, just outside of Pinehurst, does it on a much more sophisticated and larger level. I have purchased it from them, but that carbon will be in the ground for centuries. If you would like to see any of these techniques in practice, please feel free to visit our gardens this afternoon. They're particularly lovely this time of year. If you can't make it this afternoon, the gardens are open for touring at any point that I'm home. If you Google the gardens at Sunnymount, you'll come up with an article that describes the gardens and includes our contact information. Just call or text me. If I'm home, the gardens are open. And I look forward to seeing you there. Next, I'd like to introduce Jan Sutton, who's a church member and a member of the Climate Crisis Working Group. Jan.
Hi. As you can see, all of us are expecting Lori O'Loughlin to be presenting a presentation about our organization and a few Climate 101 facts. However, she broke her wrist last Thursday, and she had surgery Friday. She was hoping to be here for a short period of time, but she's just not ready for it. However, we are lucky enough. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then I'm going to introduce Betty Barnett, who will be doing the presentation. So Lori is co-founder and leader of the Climate Crisis Working Group of Moore County. She received the Governor's Award for Volunteerism in 2022. She is a certified leader with the Climate Reality Project, Al Gore's organization dedicated to developing leadership to combat the climate crisis. a mother and grandmother passionate about working to ensure that she leaves her grandchildren a better world than they are facing now, as many of us agree with. A little bit about Betty. Betty is also a very active member in the climate group since its beginning. She is also a certified trained leader with the Climate Reality Project, has done a number of presentations for our organization. She's a retired math high school teacher, grandmother of 6, and a great-grandmother of 3. She's an original member of the Climate Crisis Working Group, as I mentioned, and a Citizens Climate Lobby member. She testifies and lobbies for climate issues and submits columns and letters for publications, among many other things that she does. So, Betty?
See, we're already in. Well, thank you. We're very excited to be with you and appreciate this invitation. We just celebrated our 5th birthday, the Climate Crisis Working Group, or CCWG. We're excited to have the chance to tell you about ourselves and invite you to join our efforts. First, I'd like to congratulate, let's see, I've got to get my signals. Okay. Go ahead. Now we're ahead. I thought I saw a picture of your church, but at first I want to congratulate CCP for the steps you've taken already toward caring for the earth. First, you put solar panels on your roof. That was a great example to the whole community. This image was on the weekend news dump for the CCWG just last September. What a great and timely article you had in the Pilot about this project. And second, you've embarked on this journey with the Climate Action Handbook, and we're so excited to learn what you learn and can share as you take these actions. All right. Today we're going to tell you a little bit about who we are and talk about the impacts of the climate crisis and actions we can take, especially regarding plastic and waste reduction. We're grateful to these organizations which have assisted and contributed information and slides to this presentation: the Dogwood Alliance, Climate Reality Project, Mom's Clean Air Force. Our vision is an aware and empowered nation, united rapidly stemming rapidly stemming the impact of climate change and building climate resilience in our country and across the world. Our mission is to study and share information about climate change and take effective climate action in Moore County and beyond. We are an independent, nonpartisan group which enables us to connect with more schools, churches, and other organizations. We're most focused on local actions and outreach, and following the adage of think globally, but act locally. Susan Southard and Laurie O'Loughlin, the co-founders of CCWG, received the Governor's Award in '22, for which we are deeply grateful. Laurie is the leader for our group now, and with a super core team of passionate folk helping. We gathered together in Susan Southard's house in March of 2019 to brainstorm our concerns for our community, for the generations to come, and for our future. We started reading and discussing. Our first book was Uninhabitable Earth, which scared the living daylights out of us. So we picked up another book, Drawdown, and began learning about solutions to the climate change and how to share that information with our community. We continued to read as much as we could and developed our mission and our vision to help us guide actions. Then the pandemic hit and we learned to Zoom, and we learned more. We realized the climate crisis is real and there are things to be done. Most important is to talk to people, and we continue to work on this because for some reason taking care of the planet has become a political issue. 5 of us have taken leadership training from Climate Reality. Laurie has done it 3 times. Our outreach has largely been in tabling, booths, presentations, and participating in parades. We strive for a presence in the community with our tents and booths and outreach to businesses, schools, and churches. We publish a bi-weekly weekend news dump, a sample of which you can see at our table, and you can sign up to receive it with your email. Some of our members have testified at DEQ hearings about in vivo wood pellets, and at the State Utilities Commission with Duke's Energy Carbon Plan. We hosted a candidate forum in 2020. We've allied ourselves with organizations of like mind. And we have 2 years in a row co-sponsored free screenings of important movies and hope to do so again this year. We've received some grant funding through NAACP and Black Voters Matter. In the past year, we formed 2 action teams to focus on the 2 most important aspects of our action, the PWR, or plastic waste reduction, and the YEP, or youth education and presentations. We have made several presentations partnering with the Southern Pines Library, examining sustainable fashion and recycling education for the little ones at Atlas and the bigger kids in STEAM. Jan will tell us about some of those materials because she has spearheaded the work with the library.
Last October, we presented a program for youth and adults on sustainable fashion and fast fashion. I will not go into a lot of detail about this right now, but I want to let you know that in the back we have a binder that has the slides. If you'd like to review that, I will place it on one of the back tables. We also have a handout, Greening Your Wardrobe, which lists a lot of local shopping places you can go, and also globally, websites and other items that may be of interest to you. The second item that you may have is Green America's Clothing Pocket Guide, which lists, and fairly simply, the types of fabrics you should be looking for and maybe not so much, and then all of the certifications, what many of the regular ones are, and descriptions of those. And Kathy shared that there are several members, including me, who are wearing our sustainable fashion. So I don't know, I don't need to have you stand up, but I know Kathy is, I know Mary Scott goes thrift shopping, and this is my sustainable outfit. These shoes, they look very plasticky, but I bought them 25 years ago and kept them. This is my linen skirt, and here's my top that I got at a bit of couture. So there are a lot of ways that you can dress sustainably. So again, please look for these items and carry on.
We partnered with Pine Scones for a bag and button giveaway in December, and leading up to Earth Month in March, we partnered with the upper elementary and middle school teachers at Moore Montessori School, and and you'll see a little more about that in a few moments. And we had a well-attended booth at the Party for the Pines, and circulated our petition about Skip the Stuff, which you can sign at the table in the back as well. And we started recognizing Better Earth businesses, local businesses that are taking steps towards sustainability and reducing single-use plastics. Our first recognition was for Pine Scones, and we're working on the next for Willoughby Market in Southern Pines. More information is available at our table, and if you know of a business that deserves such recognition, we'd love to hear from you. Take a moment to think about your level of concern about the climate crisis. On a scale of 1 to 10, are you not particularly concerned? On the other end, is it the most important issue of our time, or are you somewhere in between? If you're very concerned, we're not alone in our concern. For over 2/3 of adults and over 3/4 of teens and youth have some concern about the climate crisis, and nearly 2/3 of youth are extremely concerned. When people say it's cold outside and there's no climate change there, then here's the response. Weather describes current conditions in the atmosphere affected by the climate of a particular area. Climate describes weather conditions expected in a region generally for more than 30 years. So there's a difference. This graph describes global temperature changes from the Industrial Revolution of the late 1800s to current times. Interesting to note the flare-up around the time of World War II. The amazing thing about this graph, which traces the levels of CO2 from the dawn of the Industrial Revolution in 1850 to 2021, is the tiny little dip in 2019 and 20. See it way up high? That little dip occurred during the pandemic, when we were driving cars and boats and planes a lot less. We had a tiny breather, and now we're back to normal by the end of 21. The main source and cause of the rising global temperatures we're seeing today is the burning of fossil fuels. And of course, there are all these other contributors to the increase of CO2 and other greenhouse gases. Let your gaze go around this picture, seeing all the different sources of greenhouse gases. Some of them are closer to home than others, but they're all contributors. It's no wonder we're in a crisis. Closer to home, the company Enviva is a vanguard of one of North Carolina's fastest growing industries, biomass wood pellets. There's a large plant in Richmond County in Hamlet. Cutting down local forests to form wood pellets that are shipped across the ocean to the United Kingdom and Europe, Germany, and I understand that Japan would like to get in on this. And so they are actually creating more CO2 than the use of coal. But they're using this as a green energy to burn for electricity, because they don't count it toward the Paris Accords until it reaches their border. So cutting down over 37 million acres of natural forests to make wood pellets and shipping them in diesel fuel across the ocean doesn't count toward their CO2. In the last 60 years, 37 million acres of natural forest, tens of thousands of acres in North Carolina are cut to make wood pellets. I understand there's a bankruptcy problem for Enviva, so we're kind of hoping for that. Physical impacts, we're all familiar with the impacts of climate change, and these threats have always existed. What is unique in our lifetime is that the climate crisis makes them more frequent and more severe, and with much more drastic circumstances. The climate crisis is a threat multiplier. As I said, the climate crisis is a multiplier, and anyone can feel health and mental health impacts, but the burden of these is not distributed evenly. Communities of color and frontline communities are often affected the worst. The people in Hamlet near those plants are affected 24 hours a day by all the trucks coming, all the burning of things, the noise, and the dust. It covers everything on their property constantly. They're most likely to be displaced. Some communities are. The elderly and disabled are more vulnerable. There's a gender imbalance, those caring for others and carrying those burdens. And the youngest will be suffering the longest after we are gone. From fuel to clothing, beauty products, food production, transport, medical products, fossil fuels, and petroleum products are everywhere. And a large part is plastic production and waste. The greenhouse gas emissions from plastics accounts for 4% of the world's total GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, and that number is going up. You see, the dark blue shows plastic production emissions, and the bright blue is from incineration, which is where much of it is disposed of. As the use of fossil fuel shifts from energy and transportation, companies are using their fossil fuel production for plastic production. Plastics is their plan B for fossil fuels. 300 new plants are planned for plastic packaging of things like fruits and vegetables. Think of your lettuce and berry boxes, plastic wrappers, chip bags, inside box bags. The plastic in our food contain many dangerous chemicals. Often they don't even know what chemicals are in them. Styrofoam has styrene, a chemical linked to cancer and leaches into hot foods. No plastic should be put in a microwave, especially not styrofoam. It releases the chemicals right into your food. And that starts with hot food being put in a leftover container or the hot coffee in a styrofoam cup. 17 million barrels of oil are used for plastic production each year. 1 million plastic bottles are used every minute. One bottle of water that costs 75 cents. Do you realize that's $6 a gallon? If you buy a bottle of water, you're paying $6 a gallon for water. That's free. You wouldn't pay that for gas. And think about it, if you go to a theater or a venue or a concert or something and buy a 12-ounce bottle, take that price and multiply by 10, that's the price for a gallon of water you just paid. So if it costs you $2.50 for a bottle of water, multiply by 10. That's how much a gallon you just paid for water. So we should carry our own water, shouldn't we? The world is producing a record amount of single-use plastic waste, mostly from fossil fuels. The average person eats a credit card worth every year, some people say much more frequently, tiny microplastics are in everything. Plastic bags are one of the biggest problems. There are 100 billion single-use plastic bags per year in the U.S., 100 billion of them. After an average of 12 minutes use, it will live for over 1,000 years. So what can we do? Well, the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, have been updated. Refuse. Start with that. Straws, plastic water bottles, single-use plastic bags, utensils in takeout. Don't let them put that. Skip the stuff. When you take out food, you've got forks at home. Legislation to reduce single-use plastic bags has been blocked in the last year by our lawmakers. The North Carolina budget included language to prohibit municipalities from plastic bag bans. So they cannot, as a city, ban plastic bags. The stores can, but the city cannot. Reduce is next. Use less of everything, especially plastic. Wegmans only gives you a paper bag choice and charges a nickel. Aldi's doesn't give away bags. We should petition Harris Teeter and others to eliminate the use of plastic bags. Reuse. Use a reusable bag for shopping. We have some. Some for you. Use many times before you throw them away or wear them out. Repurposing. Clothing. Donate. Shop sustainably. Thrift. Repair. Patch. Use another way. Repurposing. And last of all, recycle. We know that only 5 to 9% of all plastic ever made has been recycled. And recycling is really something that the manufacturers, people who put out Coke bottles and all, they like to talk about recycling and say it's our fault there's so much plastic waste on the roadside because we're just not recycling enough. But they're just making way too much of it with little way to get rid of it. And we can only put bottles, jugs, and jars labeled 1 and 2 in our recycling in Moore County. So that's the only plastic. The rest is wish cycling that has to be sorted back out. You will see at our table a display of products to replace your plastic in everyday life, from cleaning products to hair care and deodorants, toothpaste bits to food storage. We're constantly finding ways. The Story of Plastic Youth Workshop for middle and upper students was a film that we showed, and we screened it at the Montessori school. And these students were very attentive for an hour and 45 minutes. Amazing. And Ariadne Degar, who was the teacher who implemented this, came up with a wonderful workbook that gave a lot of information about the movie and had the students tracking their trash and creating something from the trash. It had a glossary and all kind of facts. So look at that. It's on the table in the back. This is some of the fashion show pictures. We don't have pictures of the boats and musical instruments, but those are some of the fashion. We invite you to please sign up for the link to our next meeting. You can get our next Zoom meeting on Saturday, May 18th at 4 o'clock. We'll be talking about our goals and actions, and maybe you can help us. And this list is our usual call to action. You've already chosen some of these, but there are other ideas. You might have some articles you'd like to put in the news dump. You could recommend those, and then the rest can see that. Be a climate-conscious voter. Make your voices heard to take care of our precious earth and ourselves. Consider the candidates, their reasons for running. Are they incumbent or new? What do they say about climate or environment? You can find information at vote411.org. And if you can attend forums, you can maybe get in a good question. What do they see as their duty to reduce climate crisis? How do they plan to reduce the use of plastics? How do they plan to increase information about the climate crisis? Will they reduce climate injustice? And finally, be sure to support a candidate you agree with. A closing thought. Hope has two beautiful daughters, Anger and Courage. Anger at the way things are, courage to see that they do not remain as they are, by Catherine Hayhoe. That's in a wonderful book in our lobby display. You can take a picture of the list of books that we have in our baskets for you to look at out there. Just a closing thought for you. Thank you.